Eric DeCosta revealed some very interesting draft insights on an interview with the Lounge podcast. We talk about that, a UDFA deep dive for the Ravens, and so much more coming up on this Friday edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today on this Purple Friday. Very special edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe over there as well. 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage over here on Locked On Ravens. And thank you to all the everydayers out there. If you're a first-time listener, thanks for tuning in. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Happy Purple Friday, everyone. Very special edition of the show. We have Damian Parson from Locked On NFL Draft Bleacher Report. He does it all. He knows his stuff. We're bringing him on here on a very special edition of the show to talk Ravens draft. Damian, I know it was a whirlwind of a weekend for you last weekend. A lot of draft analysis, very surprising picks in some aspects. How do you think it all went?
Man, I think it went well. There was some unexpected turns and decisions during the draft, but that's every year. You know, nothing ever stays chalk. Teams pivot, teams zig when we think they're going to zag. So it was entertaining. It was a lot of storylines to keep track of and different things like that. And it was interesting to just see how the NFL viewed certain position groups, quarterback, receiver, running back, things of that nature. So it was a fun weekend for sure.
Yeah, 100%. The Ravens had a lot of fun because they seemingly took the entire draft. They had 11 picks. They used all 11 of those picks. It was a very big draft class for them. So we're going to talk about that throughout the day here with Damian. I'm really excited for it. And before we get into that very quickly, the reason, and Damian, you don't even know this, it's a really special episode for me. This is my 1,500th consecutive episode doing Locked On Ravens. So started this up in August of 2019. I appreciate you. You know, every single weekday, I've not missed one. My first ever episode, if you remember, Kari Vedvik out of Marshall. He was an undrafted kicker/punter. Ravens got a fifth for him. That was my first ever episode. So it's been a journey here on Locked On Ravens, and can't wait to keep going with it. So Congrats, I appreciate you, man. It's an awesome milestone to hit, and I can't wait to hit many more milestones here. But getting into the content here, Eric DeCosta, Ravens GM, did an interview with the Ravens official podcast, The Lounge. And, you know, it's always cool to hear from the decision makers after the fact because, you know, you see the process happen, you see the picks and the trades and all that being made, but you don't know the full story for the most part behind why some of those moves are made. So one of the first things here in Baltimore, Damian, is people are very excited about the Malaki Starks pick. Got him at 27. The Ravens had him as a red star, which means that he aced all the interviews, everything. Like he was one of their guys. And he kind of talked about Malaki and the process of getting to 27 and evaluating who they were going to take there. Now, they had a lot of guys, and he essentially goes through the process of you need to have a board, if you're 27, of about 29 guys, and each guy that gets taken out of that top 29, so of 30, 31, 32, that pushes another guy in your top 29 up to you. And so for Baltimore, they had guys that they liked. DeCosta actually name-dropped Josh Simmons as a guy that he really liked. He said the Chiefs got a really good player, but there was obviously the injury with Josh Simmons that probably pushed him down the board a decent amount. So Malaki was their guy. Essentially called him like an all-around, not a perfect prospect, but he checked so many boxes for them. Being a leader, obviously there were not durability, like major injuries like a Simmons concerns there. He has the versatility. He actually said that he was more worried about the teams behind them, like Buffalo and a couple other teams back, that he said once Atlanta traded up, he didn't really think that with their safety depth, they were going to need a Malaki Starks. Did you think that this was a perfect pick for Baltimore, or would you have gone somewhere else?
No, I think it was a perfect fit and pick for him. When you have one of the best players, you know, positional value thrown out the window, one of the best players in the draft, Malaki Starks has been one of the best players in college football since he was a freshman at Georgia. The moment he stepped on the field as a young 17, 18-year-old, at the University of Georgia. He made plays in the back end. And back then, the first 2 years, he was making more plays over the top of the defense, is used primarily as that free safety, that eraser of the deep ball and different things of that nature. And then this year, in 2024, this past season, Georgia didn't have the same type of talent at the cornerback position that allowed him to just play his natural position. He was kind of forced down into that nickel spot, which allowed him at the same time to showcase, I can go man to man against corners and be able to cover guys on the vertical slot fades and different things like that, and still have the wherewithal. Because it's one thing to make plays with your eyes panning forward to the quarterback from a safety position. It's a different thing when you're running stride for stride with someone in man coverage and you got to turn and locate. And he does that extremely well. He's a willing tackler in the run game, being a +1 type of guy. And again, high instincts, high football IQ, high character, can come in and bring leadership, good athlete. I think pairing him with Kyle Hamilton, man, like that is, and to me, I remember a former scout told me this years ago. He was like, man, listen, unless you are a team that absolutely dominates your division, you draft for your division. You draft to win your division. He said, yeah, when you look at Tom Brady or the Patriots at the time, they had the AFC East on lock. So they weren't drafting to beat the Bills or Dolphins or Jets. They were drafting to beat Peyton Manning in the Colts or Peyton Manning in the Broncos and things of that nature. So with Joe Burrow and, whatever they're doing in Pittsburgh and the mess that is the Cleveland Browns, like, you know what I mean? When you look at what the Ravens are drafting for, they're drafting to knock off, and not just knock off, but keep Joe Burrow where he is. And I think Malaki Starks, especially after seeing the news that, hey, we're bringing back both his receivers. Yeah. You don't really see teams do that nowadays. They sign one, tag and trade the other, or just let the other one go. No, since they said we're bringing back both, and in that situation, I love the fit of Malaki, because now you can go some 2 high safety sets with him and Kyle Hamilton. You can start rotating either one of them. Both of them can play. Both guys can play in the slot and be that big nickel, right? So outstanding fit for me. I think Zach Orr is going to have a whole lot of fun designing secondary calls to really change the picture for these quarterbacks from pre-snap to post-snap.
Yeah, it's an exciting pick. And I was actually kind of shocked to hear him name drop a guy. Like, sometimes GMs will do that, but seemed like they were pretty enamored with Josh Simmons. There were rumors they really liked Tyler Booker, who obviously was nowhere within their range when he went to Dallas. But they had a couple guys, and you have to that late in the draft because you can't predict who's going to be there and who's not going to. But DeCosta did call this one of the best possible outcomes with Malaki being there. And we'll get into a couple more shocking comments that DeCosta made. Not in a bad way or anything, but I just think it's interesting to hear the decision-making process. But there was a trade, and it wasn't a big trade that Baltimore made. It was a small little trade. The Ravens moved back from 136 to 141, so they moved back 5 spots from the 4th into the 5th. They only moved up 5 spots in the deal that they got back from Tennessee, up 5 spots there. So in my opinion, that deal's not great value for Baltimore because you're moving back 5 spots in a more valuable round to just move up the same amount of spots in a less valuable round. Eric DeCosta talked about that and essentially made the story, or kind of related it to being a timeout. He said, but there are no timeouts in the draft, so they had to fake an injury. That is what Eric DeCosta said. They faked an injury here. And then Ryan Mink and Garrett Downing, who do a great job over on the lounge, they were like, well, was that because there was maybe a pick that went a pick before you or a couple picks before and you kind of were scrambling? And Eric DeCosta was like, well, I don't know. I can't. He said, I'm 54. I'm getting a little murky. I don't remember why. But I'm sitting here like, there's no way that this is the reason that we are pulling out here. Look, I thought the Ravens draft was awesome. I thought they got a lot of good players. To me, Damian, I thought that was the worst moment of their draft. They didn't get value. And if they're saying, hey, maybe they just didn't know who to pick, that can happen. And guys get sniped to pick before you. That happens. Baltimore's been in those conversations, but I don't know, man. It was a little crazy the way that all went down, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's not a quote I want to put out there. I want to put out there that we faked the injury, and because no, you're right. You traded back and you got way less value. And it's just not it's not a decision that you typically think to make, is to trade back and acquire picks in again, unless you feel really good about where you are and what your situation is, and you're like, you know what, cool. But like typically, it's like when you're trading back into the and you're trying to. I'm not trying to move up into 6. I'm more so trying to add picks for next year with that move and with that decision, getting the 4th or 5th for 2026 and feeling happy about that. So that is a very interesting quote. Don't think I've ever heard a GM make an analogy like that. So that's very interesting. Very interesting by Eric DeCosta.
Yeah, I was definitely a little shocked to hear that comment. And we know Eric DeCosta, he loves to have fun with the media, make up some stories. I don't know if you saw their April Fool's prank this year. They said that astrological signs are a big part of their evaluation process. So he was asked about Malaki Starks and his sign, and he said, he's too good. We need to get a sign in there. So
well, that's a good way to give your fans a heart attack.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wait a minute. Are we looking at zodiac signs to draft our guys?
Yeah. He made a comment about Madden ratings at I think it was the Combine, where he said
I remember that comment.
They factor in Madden ratings to their evaluation process, and I know Rick Johnson was like, yes, like let's go. So I hopefully, the Ravens, and I don't know that he's mentioned something about Chad Steele not being in the room and he needs to be there. So I don't know the whole process, but definitely the worst move of Baltimore's draft, in my opinion. But
absolutely,
if that was the worst move of their draft, it means they had a pretty good one. So coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be diving into a bit more of what DeCosta had to say, particularly about the tight end position and Mark Andrews, because he made comments on that, as well as getting into a bit of a undrafted free agent deep dive, because we know how much Baltimore loves their undrafted free agents. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive in 100 premium titles, including EA Sports Call of Duty 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. And for me, I have my console in one room, and I don't want to move it around whenever I want to play it in a different room. But what if you could jump into your favorite Xbox titles without needing your console in every room? That is what Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K can do for you. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Again, available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Damian Parson still rocking out with you on this Purple Friday. Appreciate everybody for being here. Damian, the Ravens have 3 tight ends going into contract years this year. Their entire tight end room is going to be a free agent after this year. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kolar. There were a lot of trade rumblings around Mark Andrews before and even during the draft. Andrews obviously had the really tough game in Buffalo. He wasn't the only reason they lost, but had a couple of really awful moments in that game. Andrews has a pretty big cap hit, and they have Isaiah Likely waiting in the wings. So a lot of people said, hey, maybe they can move on from Mark, get some value back. Isaiah can slide into that number 1 job, and then this is a very good tight end class. Maybe they could draft somebody to maybe slot in as their 3rd tight end. Eric DeCosta talked about the whole situation. He said during the draft, they never really had those discussions and the phone never really rang. But he also said that, they had some discussions early on going back to Mark Andrews, and that, the conversations they had were that, hey, we value Mark more than most teams, more than anybody else, but also made it clear that it was a really good tight end class to him. He mentioned guys like Colson Loveland, Tyler Warren, you got Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin, like there were all those guys. And he said, we would have considered those guys for sure. We would have easily taken a tight end. And he even said run with 4 tight ends on their roster this year, which was a little shocking to me because 4 tight ends, obviously the Ravens, they can probably get away with that based off of their offense. Now, in the Greg Roman days, they could have 100% gotten away with that. Monken's offense is obviously a little different, but it would have been probably the most shocking pick of the draft, in my opinion, if Baltimore's there at 27. And look, Loveland and Warren weren't there, but if they were and they took one of those guys, or if they took a 2nd-round tight end, if Mike Green wasn't there, I would have just, jaw on the floor. And was that something you even had on their radar?
No, not at all. Of course, the Mark Andrews discussion was, it was a talking point, since that divisional round game, the game against Buffalo, And, people, there was a lot of rumble like, hey, he might get cut. Teams are looking to trade for him, things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, if Colston Loveland were to have fallen into their hands, I wouldn't have been upset with the pick, just because of how high I had him. He's one of my top 10 players in this draft, and my tight end one. It was him and Tyler Warren as the true first rounders, and then Mason Taylor, Elijah Arroyo, coming in as that next tier of guys. But yeah, I did not have tight end on the radar at all. I feel like, and I think I said this after the AFC game against Buffalo in the playoffs. It's time to me, Todd Monken in this offense from a tight end standpoint needs to run through Isaiah Likely. He's the guy that gives you more bang for your buck, more juice after the catch, more physicality. He gets open a lot easier, and then he's more sure-handed right now, and he'll make those combat and those collision catches as well. So I think, truthfully, the best decision was not trading or getting rid of Mark Andrews, keeping him and Isaiah Likely together, and unless somebody comes with a nice trade during the middle of the season, I run it back with both of those guys, but I would run. If I'm gonna run the passing game through either one of those tight ends, I want to run it through Likely because I get more explosiveness, more juice once the ball's in his hands.
Both guys are electric, but you're right. Likely just has that oomph to him that at this point, like
physical dude.
Yeah, Mark on that play when he was in the middle of the field and just kind of like tried to cut it back and got too cute with it, and the ball gets punched out, and he just drops it, and you're like, okay. Would Isaiah have made that same thing happen? Again, it's not a slight to Mark. Mark, in my opinion, is still a top 5 tight end. I think he's very talented. I'm not going to let that one game define who he is as a player because he had so many moments. But, I mean, look, if anything, a tight end room of Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Colston Loveland, and Charlie Kohler, man, I don't even know how you'd use all those guys on the field at the same time. But it would be a pick for the future more than anything because do know that at the end of the day, Mark and Isaiah are both going to get paid after this year. And they realistically can probably only keep one of those guys. It's just the way it is. The Ravens draft really well, and you can't keep everybody. So
no, you can't.
I feel like for Baltimore, even if I wouldn't have been shocked if they had taken like a Luke Lachey in the 6th or 7th round, like one of those later round tight end guys. But seemed like they were a little more interested in the position than originally a lot of people actually thought they were. So that was a little shocking to me. Eric DeCosta also talked a bit about, the Ravens have found a lot of small school gems, Damian. Like that's been part of their franchise history, but they've pivoted more back to the big school names. He talked about how at this point, especially with NIL, they're getting paid and it's more like a pro program over with a lot of these places. And so, you have them more pro ready at this point in Baltimore. They're trying to win a Super Bowl. So the more pro ready you can be, the more instant impact, because he talked about how you have these guys for 4 years. And then at that point, it's either you re-sign them or you just let them walk. So they want to maximize as much of those 4 years as they can with the current team that they have. For other teams, it's like, projects are fine. Rebuilding teams, you want to wait a couple years to get the high upside. That's great. But the fact that Baltimore's been moving away from small school guys as much as they had has been something that a lot of people are noticing. And these comments essentially confirm, hey, feels like with the shift in how college football is working now and all the NIL and the money and whatever, feels like a lot of these teams value the pro readiness that these players seem to be getting.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at the big school guys and, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Michigans, not only are those teams kind of ran like professional teams in a sense, but it's also a situation where that they are well coached, they're hard coached, they're coached hard, and they're also going to those programs, that there's expectations. So it's like pressure, being used to pressure. Like they always say, pressure is going to create diamonds or it's going to burst pipes. And guys that come from those particular big top dog programs, it's easier to see them in high pressurized situations simply because of the magnitude of the conference they play in, right? Like I'm not a big SEC, big power conference guy. I pay attention, of course, to all conferences, but I understand why NFL teams feel that way for the ones who do. Because if you turn on the SEC game on the Saturday, a Saturday night in prime time, you're probably running into a Alabama versus LSU or LSU versus Georgia. And it's like, it's not just a meeting of the powerful teams. It's you know what? If we lose this game, we might be out of the SEC championship game. And not only that, we might be out of the college football playoffs. So it's a lot of things that goes into it now. So I totally understand those comments and that kind of point of view from Eric DeCosta.
Yeah, and you mentioned it with Malaki Starks at the beginning of the show. It's like, he's been playing in big games for years now. Like, second he stepped onto that Georgia campus, like he talked about, like he's a big gamer. He's been made for those moments. He's been forged in those moments. And the fact that Baltimore and I think other teams as well have shifted, and that's not to say small school prospects aren't good or don't have chances. I'm not trying to say that whatsoever. I know you aren't.
It's just a leap. It's a leap in going against different talent. A leap in, that's why all small school kids typically, if they get an invite from the Shrine to the Senior Bowl, they attend so that they can prove to, like Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, who went 18 to the Seahawks. Why did he go 18? He went to the Senior Bowl and he was dominant for 3 days of practice. Like the dude was dominating SEC, Ohio, like Big Ten. Like no matter what defensive lineman that he faced, he was winning those one-on-one reps, and that proved a lot to where a team like the Seattle Seahawks say, you know what? We're willing to take that swing on you in first round because we watched you go out there and battle some of the bigger school guys, and you were the one that was successful in those matchups.
Well, you want to know where the nation's sack leader went? It wasn't Alabama. It wasn't LSU. It was Marshall, and the Ravens took him at pick number 59, 17 sacks. I think a fall, Damian, that a lot of people weren't anticipating. Obviously, he fell for a reason. There was the off-field allegations and that whole thing that obviously some teams took him off their board completely for. Eric DeCosta made some comments about the Mike Green selection. Obviously, on the field, gushed about him, but did say that they did all they could, as much as they could, to figure out if they were comfortable enough to take Mike Green. They said they got information from Virginia, from Marshall. They sent in multiple area scouts, talked to people in his hometown. And at the end of the day, they felt comfortable enough to take him at 59. Now, on the field, this guy, bona fide star, top 10, 15 talent. Where did you have him on your board? And were you shocked that he did fall that far and that Baltimore is the team to take him?
Yeah, he was one of my top 15, top 12 players in this draft. And one of the most natural pass rushers in terms of knowing how to get to the quarterback, the first step quickness, the speed, the power, explosiveness. Talk about the Senior Bowl. This young man had the most viral rep of the Senior Bowl with his bull rush of Josh Connolly, who went to the Washington Commanders at pick 29 in the first round, and his ability to stay low with his pad level and talk, like I said, talking about guys from smaller programs getting the opportunity against big schools. You turn the tape against Ohio State, and he was one of the best players on the field, bar none. The speed, the explosiveness, the way he was putting pressure on the right tackle, and his ability to that spin move, the ghost punch into the dip and rip. Like he has a bag as a pass rusher. And it's like, man, for me, I always talk about on the podcast, 3rd and 10 is like being in the fourth quarter of a basketball game and you're down 2. Who are you giving the rock to? Like do I have a guy that can get a bucket, right? Like I'm a Detroit Piston fan. I know I could trust Cade Cunningham to go get the Miami Heat game, the 3 to close the game, to win that game on the road, right? Like I could trust him in the moments we need him, right? All the Kyrie Irvings, the LeBron James, like those bucket getters. As a pass rusher, I need a guy that I know for a fact, one-on-one on third downs, we can ice the game here. Like, hey, this 3rd and 10, 4th and 10, if we get back here and get this sack, game over. We get the ball back. We kneel out, getting the best formation in all of football, the victory formation. Yeah, Mike Green has that. And I believe he's the bucket getter that this defense needs off the edge. And again, you are drafting for the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. Those 3 quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen. And outside of that Pittsburgh game, the Ravens defense, the pass rush wasn't that fruitful against the Buffalo Bills. Even though they didn't throw a whole lot, they threw, I think, 23, 25 times. It just didn't get back there enough to disrupt what Josh Allen was doing. Heck, Mike Green, man, the fact that he fell, I figured, like, okay, some teams are going to take him off their board. I didn't expect him to fall out of round 1 at all. But for the Baltimore Ravens to get him, absolute steal and I love it.
It feels like just it's the Ravens, the Eagles, those teams that you're just like, man,
Yeah.
how do they keep doing it? How do they keep getting those guys? And for the
Yeah.
Ravens, this was another example of that. And to your point, in the AFC North, the Browns have Myles Garrett, the Bengals have Trey Hendrickson, the Steelers have TJ Watt. The Ravens didn't have that guy, that bucket getter. I'm a Nuggets fan, so a Nikola Jokic, right? A guy like you can put the ball in his hands, he's going to make something happen for you. Well, Mike Green, I think, can be that guy because, look, Kyle Van Noy, Dafa Elway, those are solid players. Those are solid pass rushers. But Mike Green with the 3-down ability instantly, early on, great as a run defender as well. You mentioned the Ohio State tape, that spin move he had. That's the clip that's going viral everywhere. And so he has a plan with his moves. I think, again, from an on-field perspective, you have a top player in this class. And obviously off the field, Baltimore, again, felt comfortable enough to take him at that spot. We're going to get into those UDFAs, though. First thing we're going to do coming up on the final part of the show, as well as how Baltimore made out in the draft and some of Damian's favorite Baltimore late-round picks. So stay tuned. A lot coming away on the show. Back on Locked On Ravens with Damian Parson. I am Kevin Oestreicher, still diving into the Ravens. Let's dive into a bit of their UDFA class here, Damian, because we know Baltimore's that team. They try to find a UDFA or two that can impact their roster. They had that streak for all those years, and they still have a lot of guys who have been incredible UDFA contributors. They found a gem in Darius Washington, who I think is their most recent guy who has stepped up to the plate for them. Who are a couple of guys from their UDFA class that you like and that you feel like could potentially be dark horses to make this roster?
Jay Higgins, the linebacker out of Iowa. This is a guy that to me pairs very well with Roquan. He's studious, he's instinctive, high football IQ. Like he has a nose for the football. The thing that hurt him was that he wasn't a great athlete. And it's like, man, if he was a better athlete, he's not only drafted, he's probably a day 2 pick. He's a tackle machine. He fills run lanes well, but also he's a willing blitzer. And when you talk about simulated pressures of like just showing blitz at the line of scrimmage, mugging up the A gap, and then tricking and forcing that quarterback to make that quick decision because he thinks, hey, both of these linebackers, both of them on the way to me. They're about to hit the A gap and blitz. Jay Higgins is good at helping you disguise coverages and looks, and then dropping off to a spot and making a play on the ball. I think Roquan's going to love him. To be completely honest, I think Roquan's going to love him. Brings leadership. And a guy that leads by example, as well as a guy that can actually lead with his voice as well. So I think he's probably one of my favorite ones that you guys were able to add. And then I like Jamal Banks. He used to be at Wake Forest. Big, tall wide receiver that, to me, I've always said this. Lamar Jackson has never – I remember the team did it for Joe Flacco. They went out and get a strong-handed ball winner, Anquan Bolden, later on in his career, right? Then you went and got Steve Smith Sr. when the Panthers let him go and everything. For me, it's like, man, the Ravens never truly had that big 6'2", 3, 4 big body wide receiver that could just make plays at the catch point. Jamal Banks can do that. He can be a weapon in the red zone, a guy that can be that prototypical X receiver. They've had the Z in the slots, the F receiver spot locked down. They had the tight ends. They've never had the X, and I think Jamal Banks can bring that as well. Has good build-up speed, decent route runner as well. He just wasn't Nebraska wasn't a great offense with the freshman Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes Jr. in college football. He was a freshman, man. He was trying to get his bearings and really get used to the speed of the game and everything. And I just look at it from an aspect of, I think this guy can come in, and now having DeAndre Hopkins, if he makes the team, I would put his locker right beside D-Hop, and I want him to learn everything he can from one of the best to ever do it in the NFL, and the guy that's been QB proof his entire career. And then Nash Hutmacher, the big defensive lineman from Nebraska as well, 6'4", 310, guy that can play that 0, the 1, that 2-eye, the 5 tech. He's just physical at the point of attack. He's strong. I think this is a guy that can definitely add more depth to this defensive line and give you the type of rotation. We talked about it on the show. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens have been two teams that have been good at keeping multiple bodies in their defensive line room. to be able to rotate guys in and keep fresh legs. So I think those are the guys I look forward to kind of watching when rookie camp is underway. And okay, will these guys make the roster because they have the talent and the physical tools to do so?
All the guys that you mentioned filled a specific need or would fill a specific need for Baltimore. Baltimore lost 3 inside linebackers this offseason: Malik Harrison, Chris Board, Christian Welch. So a guy like a Jay Higgins or even a Chandler Martin, who's a really good coverage linebacker, he comes out of Memphis, like that could be a guy that is maybe a dark horse for a roster spot on the defensive line. Jason Jones out of Auburn, he's huge, 6'6". They lost Michael Pierce to retirement. And so while they did add Aeneas Peebles, he's not the biggest hulking defensive lineman you've ever seen. So I think having a guy to complement that could really work out in their favor. So I think Baltimore added a lot of solid guys here. Now, again, who knows how many make the roster because they didn't really lose a ton this offseason and 11 picks. That's a big draft class. So they're going to have some tough decisions to make. But I think, Damian, taking a look at the rest of Baltimore's draft class here, we didn't dive into Emory Jones quite yet. That was their other day 2 pick outside of Mike Green. Then you have Teddy Buchanan, linebacker from California, was their first. They added a hulking offensive lineman in Carson Vincent, who's ready to go. They doubled down at corner. They took a kicker for the first time in franchise history. I think LaJohntay Wester is really intriguing as a slot returner option for them. And then, my favorite out of all these guys is Aeneas Peebles, who I was pounding the table for every single pick the Ravens had on day 3. That's how high I am on him as a pass rusher. Who are some of your favorite guys Baltimore took in those later rounds?
Oh, man, I love the Aeneas Peebles one. He is a gap shooter, 6'1", 290 pounds, good first step. This is the type of guy that you want to tell him slant, get in between those gaps, especially as a pass rusher, and he plays with that. He's got a bowling ball build as a defensive tackle with that short. He's a leverage winner as well. I really like that fit. Emory Jones in the 3rd round, pick 27, a guy that can play that right tackle spot, but I think he projects better in that guard. I've been critical of Daniel Falele. Yes, he's been serviceable at the right guard spot, but this is a big guy that has struggled in pass protection at times from a lateral quickness and just athleticism standpoint. That's not a problem with Emory Jones, as well as the fact that he brings the physicality you want to see from a Baltimore Raven offensive lineman. So I think this is a guy that can come in and battle for that day 1 spot at right guard. And if he wins it, he's going to add the type of aggressiveness and aggression to literally move people off the ball and create more running lanes. So that was one of my favorite picks as well. And then I love the Carson Vincent pick out of Alabama A&M. And this is a young man that has the size, the height, weight, arm length, everything is that developmental tackle, 6'7", 34.5-inch arms. And, I think with his movement skills and with the arm length, you say to yourself, like, listen, you know what? This is the type of guy that, we put him behind. I believe Roger Rosengarten's long-term answer, at right tackle. Put him behind Ronnie Stanley, and let him learn for about a year or 2, and then get prepared to let him be the guy and make Stanley expendable or let his contract run out and save yourself some money. So those are that. Oh, LaJohntay Wester, simply from the fact of, for one, punt return, like the special teams value, flipping the field position when your defense gets a stop. But go back to the playoffs. No Zay Flowers, so no slot intermediate route runner that can make your plays after the catch, that has the speed and playmaking ability. He didn't have that in the playoffs because he got hurt. So I think he's a backup plan for Zay Flowers as well, just in case he could do similar things. Zay to me is stronger and more physical, but in terms of coming off the ball with explosiveness, working in the middle of the field, getting yak, different things like that. Yeah. Like LaJohntay Wester is the other pick I really like.
Feels like Baltimore hit on a lot of boxes this draft. I think, obviously best player available at spots, need, even though they didn't have a huge one coming into the draft, but they were able to hit on a lot of the pieces that they needed to complete their roster. So day 1, day 2, and day 3, even undrafted free agency, Baltimore seemed to get a lot of the guys that they wanted and a lot of positions that they felt could really round out the roster. But Damian, I appreciate your time. Thank you for hopping on the way out. What was your draft grade for Baltimore? And then obviously tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Of course. My draft grade for Baltimore was an A. We broke down the grades this week on Locked On NFL Draft, and I gave you guys an A. I love what you did. I believe Keith did as well. So shout out to Eric DeCosta. Really good draft overall, and undrafted free agency class as well to bring in some competition. And of course, guys, you can find me 5 days a week, Monday through Friday on Locked On NFL Draft, wherever you get your podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Also, Bleacher Report, all of the scouting reports, offensive, from quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight ends from this draft cycle. And I'll be doing some rookie contributions over there as well during the offseason. I also have my own YouTube channel called The Scouting Room, where I do film breakdowns, starting topical discussions with my guy Daniel Harms this offseason as well, getting ready to drop an NFL podcast. So, yeah, man, a lot of things in the work right now.
A lot of things. He's a busy man, and of course, he is one of the many great and talented people we have over here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and does a whole lot else. So be sure to support him, support his work. Links will be in the description down below. Damian, I appreciate you as always. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, listened today to Locked On Ravens. We might have a bonus episode or two over the weekend because rookie camp begins May 3 through May 5. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Hit like and subscribe button in video form, follow along in audio form, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.